Hello, welcome to another episode of the Vocal Journeyman. And maybe there may be times where I feel like I'm being too bold in asserting that I'm a journeyman and is not an apprentice, but no, I think I can convince myself by hard evidence that that's true. So welcome back. Today we're going to be taking on a very, very interesting topic, which to me is the next in sort of the foundations of understanding of the voice and how it works. And this is resonance and formants. So we want to talk about this notion of resonance. And probably the best way to do this, we can actually get at some of this from Wikipedia articles. It's that simple. There's lots of places you could look, but the Wikipedia articles on phonation and vocal resonation are going to lay this out for you pretty clearly. So I want to talk to you guys about what resonance is and why it is that resonance can amplify a sound. And basically, almost everything that you see around you, now I'm going to start really, really broad and then we're going to dial this in, but almost everything you see around you can be affected by vibrations, a sound especially. So that's really what we're thinking about. Vibrations or oscillatory waves. There are mechanical waves that, any of you, if you're into the whole Tesla fascination thing, in the realm of pseudoscience, there's the Tesla oscillator that you could put on the side of the bridge, the beam of a bridge, dial it into the resonant frequency of the bridge and start pumping that thing full of energy. And then, the earthquake machine, the Tesla earthquake machine. That's not quite what we're looking at here, but the idea is really still the same. We're talking about the fact that substances and shapes, and in this case, your vocal tract, when it's filled with air, if you pump in a regular oscillation into that, depending on its shape, it will start to resonate sympathetically with that driving force that's pumping it. And so that's the easiest way to understand what resonance is in the voice. Okay? Resonance is basically happening in the voice where your breath support and you're passing the air over the vocal folds, and the vocal folds, either through complete closure or incomplete closure, are kind of jiggling very quickly. Sometimes 400 hertz, 800 hertz, 1,000 hertz, that's 1,000 times per second. But that interruption or disturbance of the air is then going into the area of your vocal tract past the vocal folds, and it's sympathetically causing that area to resonate relative to various frequencies and harmonics, okay? And I'm not going to bring that in today, overtones, simply for the fact that we'll hint at it toward the end of today, and I'll give you a setup on that, how that will work, the issue of overtones in music and in sound and in resonators. But here's basically the heads up on this. We're going to take a look right here at this picture. It's as simple as this. Your lungs are going to pressurize air. You're going to use the diaphragm to pull air into the lungs. And I'm not going to talk about support today. I'm not going to talk about different techniques of support. There's a few that I know. Two actually. But what happens then is, as the air is released, it's going to come up the trachea. It's going to go through the larynx right here, past the vocal folds, and depending on how the vocal folds are set up, whether we're talking about being vocal fry, we're talking about being in chest voice, remember the registers, M0, M1, M2, mixed voice setup, then they're going to start to vibrate. That vibration is going to take that resonation and take it up through the larynx and into the pharynx. And then, depending on whether this part right here, which is called your soft palate, which I'll show you a little bit later, whether that's open or closed, all or most of that resonance that's set up in the pharynx is then also going to have to resonate to some degree and then exit through the mouth, producing the sound. Now, it's going to be worth our while before I get into this, which is going to look at the vocal resonators in more detail, or things people have claimed are vocal resonators in your singing, right, in human phonation. It's going to be worthwhile for us to take a look at a little bit about resonators, okay? So the thing that we want to think about here, as I just said, you can see this, we we want to talk about the shapes of resonators, okay? Because the shape of a thing will define loosely its overall resonation, okay? And one of the interesting things that we will see is that your vocal tract has the ability to be shaped in a lot of different ways. And there are several things that can do this. One is the soft palate that can be lowered or raised. The other is the epiglottis, which is the thing which swallows. It's sitting at the front. We'll get into that in a little bit. But it can come back and close. When you swallow, that epiglottis closes off your air pipe so food can go down. But a slight amount of pulling the epiglottis back, a really controlled and consistently applied amount of epiglottic closure, just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, can help to increase resonance by changing the shape of the connection between the larynx and the pharynx, okay? And then once we talk about taking that out, are we going to vibrate out to the full length with a ooh, ah, okay? All of those changes right there, those are actually your vowel sounds. So those vowel sounds are directly connected to these things we're going to talk about called formants, okay? Now, I hope I didn't jump in too deep right here, but basically, if you remember that a forcing vibration, okay, is going to cause a cavity full of air to vibrate sympathetically. Basically, it's a pipe. You have pipes built into you, okay? You got a pipe built right into you. And that if the shape of that resonating chamber has what would be called resonant frequencies, and everything, as I said, has a resonant frequency. Now, depending on its shape and depending on the material that it's made out of, either the fundamental frequency, okay, will be kept, okay, or some overtone in the overtone series will be sympathetically resonated within the chamber. Now, how does it get amplified if it's in there? The way that typically a resonator will seem to amplify things, and this is why people who use singers' formant and other things, that they can get their voice to get so loud, twang helps, is that the same thing? Is that what will happen is that the resonating chamber can actually convert pressure of a driving wave into amplification of the sound. And that sounds to me like, that almost sounds like mumbo jumbo, because you say, well, a sound wave is nothing but pressure. But what actually is happening is that somehow your throat can be put in, your throat and the resonators after your larynx can be put in a state where they actually are giving back. They're responding and resonating and giving back and building the sound. Now they're filtering it, okay? But the fact of the matter is that in mixed voice resonation, you do not have to sing as hard to get as loud of a sound. And it's really, really difficult for me to cover all the different aspects of this in a short video. And I am, in a certain sense, because I know this is going to feel like a deep dive for some of us, I'm expecting you to go out and look some of this stuff up. And I'll try and put some resources up here that are useful in this connection. But for right now, think of that. Think of a balloon that is able to change its shape. So part of the balloon is made out of harder material than other material, and part of it is really soft, and you can change its shape, and then you can blow and make a little into it, and it will filter out. It will absorb certain frequencies within that fundamental that you made, right? The overtone series of that fundamental, and it will let others pass through. And some, it will actually not just let them pass through, it will actually amplify them. That's in a nutshell how it works. And trying to model this thing mathematically gets really, really complex. I would recommend you guys take a look at some of the work of guys like Ingo Titze, Titze, spent a lot of time on this and employed some really fancy mathematics. We're not going to go there. I will go there if I'm trying to develop some tools for singers. I'll go there if I need to. but I'll stay away from it otherwise. But let's take a look at some of the resonating chambers. So we know that your vocal folds and your registration, okay, we're going to for now assume that your registration is an independent driver of the resonating chambers. Okay. Now that's not entirely true, because at higher levels there is back pressure that develops, which creates a nonlinear response between glottic, postglottic, and subglottic and supraglottic pressure. Right. That's the pressure above and below your vocal folds, and the resonance within all of your resonators. There is a nonlinear relationship that happens in certain ways there. But for the most part, your vocal folds are a linear driver. You push harder, if you create more energy coming through the vocal folds, you get more energy into the system. Okay? Now, there's a lot of questions here. When you go across the literature, you won't find an exact description of how it is that this pressure at the glottis is able to be transformed. It really appears that what happens is that the other resonating surfaces have the ability to resonate along with what you're driving it with, and therefore it's storing the energy just a little bit. And it's all happening quickly because you're getting 400 cycles per second, 1,000 cycles per second. And so it just feels like, I've experienced this, and I've heard some singers say this, when you hit a solid mixed voice, it feels like a ball of energy that is free and open and surging. In fact, there was a famous female opera singer who said she never in her entire lifetime had a sense of registration because all her notes felt the same. I don't know about that, but all right. So let's get back to some of the supposed resonators that are within the human vocal tract. And remember that these, at the level of your vocal folds, the sound that comes out is almost like a, if you go out and find a video that shows you what sound your vocal folds actually make, it's a buzz like that. It's a, and the reason that you don't hear it come out of your mouth like a buzz is because the resonators, if we take a look over here again, all of these resonators that are after the vocal folds are sympathetically resonating and filtering different aspects of that sound. Okay, so basically, if you want to think about what is my voice, it is not a bad thing for us to think about our voice as being basically the filter. This part all in here, which is the filter, and a little bit down into the epiglottic area. That's the filter. Now the sinus, we'll talk about it right now. Let's go through these things that are typically thought to be resonators for the human voice. I've got them written down right here. The chest, the tracheal tree, the larynx, the pharynx, the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, and the sinuses. Now, if you take a look at this, when you read this article, it'll at first make you think that all these are resonators, but the fact of the matter is that anything that comes before the vocal folds is not actually a true resonator, even though you may have a perception, okay? And this is because resonance can come in two forms. Resonance can be an active resonance, right? Where you basically are having a source vibration activate an air chamber, basically. That's how we're thinking of this. And then you can also have what is called a forced resonation, where you literally have a mechanical connection, and that's why you're feeling the resonance. That's why the resonance is in there, right? One of these things like the two cups with the wire between them. If you set that up right, when you speak into this cup, your voice vibrates the air, which vibrates the cup, which pulls on the other cup, and ever so faintly, that vibration over there will jiggle the air there, and a person can actually hear you. I never had that work when I was a kid, but it mechanically and physically speaking, it should work. That is the kind of resonance that you feel when you talk about feeling resonance in your head or in your chest. A lot of people, if you get down near your voice. Now, I don't really feel resonance in my chest anymore when I sing. Even if I sing, well, let me see. Low, low. Okay. I do feel a little bit of resonance here, but it is a complete misnomer to say that chest resonance is about sounds resonating in your lungs. Your chest is actually not an effective resonator. Okay, so that sense you have that your chest voice is here, if you get that, or maybe in here, that is a forced resonance. Okay, and it does have to do with the fact that those bone structures are sympathetic to that resonance, but you can play the same game by going you're going to feel that resonance different places in your arm. And if you make different pitches, you might find places where like, wow, that's really stimulating. Like that really seems to penetrate there. That's all that feeling of your voice being in your chest is. It is not a real resonation that contributes to the timbre of your voice. Okay. So cross the chest off. The tracheal tree, right, which is from the lungs up to the larynx. Again, you're not resonating in there. Now, I could go into a little bit of detail as to why we should know mechanically, right, from an engineering perspective, why that wouldn't be a good thing to have resonance be way down there. That would just be, it just would not be good. There's be things that could happen there. Okay. So cross that one off. The tracheal tree is not actually a real resonator. And this Wikipedia article does catch you up to speed on that. So the larynx as a resonator. Now they say right here that due to its small size, the larynx, let me get a picture of the larynx for y'all. You're going to jack up a big old picture of the larynx right here. No, I want to see the picture. I want to see the pretty picture. There we go. Let's see if I can get that thing to get bigger. Okay. So here's the big old picture of the larynx. This is the front of the larynx, right? Okay. And just zipping back over there. Okay. And in here are where your vocal folds are suspended. So let me get the inside view of the larynx. All right. Here's your inside view. I want a cutaway view. I want a cutaway view on this. Cutaway view of the larynx. There we go. Let's see if this one works. Oh, that's a product, huh? They have a product, which is a cutaway view of the larynx. That's a little something right there. Let's see what we got here. Okay. I like the color ones better if I have to do it. There, maybe this one will get me there. All right, let's make that image bigger. Okay. So a cutaway of the larynx, which shows, there we go. All right. The cuneiform cartilage, the thyroid, the hyoid bone, which is right up here, right? Okay. Now, right here, the cuneiform cartilage, we need some more. Okay, here's our cricothyroids. Yep, connected right there, the cricothyroid cartilage. And the vestibular folds right there. So the folds are kind of right in here, right? And this mechanism here, I am not doing this to be an anatomy lesson. Later on, I'll try to do a deeper anatomy lesson because the truth is it's quite complicated, all the different pieces here, and I forget them, okay? But the point that I'm trying to make for you is that the larynx, past the vocal folds, is the first thing that can start to resonate, and it is a small space, okay? It is a very small space. And when you read this, it can be useful only for resonating high frequencies. Now, there is this thing, this resonation that some people call the singer's formant that happens up around 2800 or 32 hertz, which brings this ping or this brilliance. I have heard debates about this as to whether that first area, so when the epiglottis comes down and closes, that first area at the top of the larynx could cause a resonation that boosts that region. Okay. I'll get back and I'll deal with twang much more in depth, and I'll do some more serious research on it, because I'm not sure if the effect that this is having is due to it making, if it's desirable for you to make the larynx resonate, as opposed to the fact that when you would close the epiglottis just a little bit in twang, you would be making the pharynx to resonate in a different way, because you would be changing the shape of the pharynx as a resonating structure by almost being able to envision it as a tube with a thinner portal coming into it. Those are questions that I will try to answer later on. But for right now, let's just go ahead and let's talk about this. So the larynx is possibly a resonator, but what I have understood from most people and in my own experience, you do not want your voice resonating in your larynx. You want the sense of resonation that you have from your voice, and you want the actual resonance coming forward. And they'll always talk about forward placement. A lot of people talk about that, but you want that voice forward. And I can see that if you think about this, again, I'm going to go back to the mechanical thing, which many of you may not be mechanically oriented, but I want you to think about taking a vibration that you're creating in your larynx and then making it stay in your larynx. It kind of makes sense that the energy that you're creating here, you want it to go out. You don't want to bottle it up in your larynx. Okay, and I don't even know how that happens, but I've heard people doing that, and I've had exercises that have been given to me that if you do them wrong, it makes your larynx hurt, and it feels like your larynx is vibrating. Okay, so you want that energy to be released forward and out. Okay, so there we go. So that deals with that. So those supposed resonators that you'll hear. So don't be deceived. Chest voice is not resonating in your chest. It's not resonating in your lower throat. It's not resonating in your larynx. Now you say, well, you can feel that. I can feel it. Here, watch. Ooh. I can feel the resonation starting there, but the sense of that resonation on that ooh is up in my hard palate and up toward the front of my face. It is not back. It is not down. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to where we get to the real resonators that help us sing. Okay. The pharynx, which is basically this area here from above the larynx up leading up to the soft palate, that area right back there, that is the primary resonator of your vocal system. It is the most important resonator, they say, and that's good. I agree with that. You know, Wikipedia is not always right. I think you guys know that, but you know, it's not too often that I feel compelled to try to edit the pages on Wikipedia. Cough. Okay. So the pharynx is the first cavity of any size through which the product of the laryngeal vibrator passes. The other supraglottal cavities have to accept whatever the pharynx passes on to them. Now that's a powerful position for your pharynx to sit in. Okay? And the pharynx, the shape of the pharynx is controlled by two things. Take a look right here at this picture. The shape of the pharynx is controlled by the position of the soft palate right here and the position of the epiglottis. That's essentially, now you do have the tongue up in the front here. And a lot of people who advocate for singing with an open throat, they're talking about doing something with the tongue. Okay? And I am not going to go in depth on the tongue right now. There's a lot that I have to learn about it, but I know enough about it to understand that, yeah, in some way the tongue is also forming the front of the pharynx. So, but the majority of what you're going to get out of your pharynx is actually going to come from the soft palate. So you got it pumping into the larynx, the vibration has started. If this epiglottis comes and closes just a little bit, you're going to be able to change some shapes in here and get some added resonances that might add extra color to your voice. And it's a technique to learn. One that, as a journeyman, I'm still learning. So I'll sing some notes for you guys later, and I'll show you some stuff on the EQ so you can see some different things there. But still growing. So there you go. So think about the prominence that understanding how to control that space near your pharynx has in the overall vocal production that you're trying to do. Okay? The next one, if we go here, let's run back over here, is going to be the oral cavity. Okay. And that's basically going to be from the tongue, basically from where the tongue is, all the way out to the front. And as you can see, you have a hard palate on the top. So you can't change the shape of that, really. And I don't know if perhaps, I don't see any way that you change anything about the resonating properties of the hard palate and the teeth, okay? And the bones, right? Okay. But you can change the overall stress level within the tongue, which would affect, to some degree, its ability to resonate, and you can shape the tongue to shape that side of the oral cavity. You can also use the lips to adjust the end of the opening, right? So if I could imagine my oral cavity as a big ball, and then I close the lips, as soon as I open them, the reason that it went from like that is because by changing the opening on that resonator, I changed the frequencies that it likes, basically. And if we really want to simplify, we'd be like, my vocal tract likes that A vowel. Okay, that's not too bad, really. I mean, that's not too bad, actually, as a way of describing it. So those are your two primary resonators here. And when you get those resonating, it makes sense that the forced resonation that you feel in your face, in your head, maybe sometimes some people will say when you start to try to go higher, it should feel like it travels up in the head. And there are many more than just one person who I have heard say that, and I have experienced that sort of a thing as well. Because that forced resonation, the higher pitch is going to require the pharynx to help filter those higher pitches, and that resonation is not going to travel forward. It's going to be more sympathetic, and it's going to rise in your head. That is forced resonation. That is forced resonation. That is not actual resonation that is building or magnifying, right? So pumped resonation that you get from the resonator building your sound, that is all coming from basically mostly the pharynx and the oral cavity. Okay? So that, what percentage of your sound is that? I would say that's got to be 85% of your sound is your pharynx and your oral cavity. Now the next one, which they say is the third most important one, is actually the nasal cavity. Okay? Now the nasal cavity is interesting because it's not technically a resonator. It's more like a sink in a certain sense. Because if you really open that palate up and you let it go in there, the sound you're going to get is actually a muffled kind of a sound. Because in order for sound to resonate through your sinuses, and it's going to actually be painful if you try to do this, depending on what pitch you do it, you're going to get those folds. If you really blast it, you're going to get those folds in there resonating. It can be bad, but typically this is actually, it will resonate to some extent, and it will affect overall resonation. Okay. Now, here's another interesting thing. The sinuses. I don't know how many of you guys know what the sinuses are in your head, but I'm going to try to get, let's see if I can get a picture of sinuses. Okay. So this is fun stuff, really. And it's just fascinating to me that these exist. Like you wonder, why did God put these things here? It's talking about sinus infection here. The sinuses are sympathetic airwaves. They do include that main passage that comes through the nose, but they also include sort of, they're almost like kind of like openings inside of your skull, And so if you have stuffed sinuses, you may not feel forward placement in your singing. And you may be a person who regularly has stuffed up sinuses, because these, as you will see, go look in the article, they correctly say that many teachers will tell you that these are resonators. They're not actually resonators. They're small air pockets that are through the nasal passages and in the bones of the face. But for some people who have good sinuses, where your sinuses are clear, and I've had those days where I'm feeling that forced resonance on the skull, and it actually feels amplified in the sinuses that I have up here. And it feels amplified in the sinuses I have here. And the thing is because those resonators are not, they're not always there. Remember, those are not the things making your voice. Those are the things that are almost like your radio receiver picking up the vibrations of your voice. And so to focus on that as a primary way of saying this is how you know you're singing well, if you are a person who has sinus problems, you may never actually feel that the way that your vocal coach is telling you to feel it. Okay? That doesn't mean it's not vibrating. It's just that if it's filled with fluid, it's not going to vibrate and feel the same way. Okay? It's just not going to happen. So there we go. So we've now nailed down the resonators of your voice. And relative to this notion of how nasal singing, there's this big thing out there that I want to get at before I jump over to formants. Okay, so we already touched on formants a little bit, and I'm really only going to just crack the door on formants because it leads to a really, really interesting next step that you hear in nearly every singing course that you do. Take a look at this right here. Take a look at, where am I? There it is. Beautiful. Take a look. Let me make sure that's coming up. There you go. All right. Take a look at this video. This video, look in this video, you'll see the soft palate right here of a singer, and it's going to list what that soft palate is doing as this person hits different vowels. Okay. So I'm going to jack this all the way back so you can see what's going on. Okay. He's singing the ng vowel that we're all told to sing, and the soft palate's all the way down. The British ah, it's all the way up. Okay? Now, a French neutral vowel, that's like an vowel in our thing. And you'll notice that that soft palate can be in multiple positions. It can be half open.